She said, I was always very clear that if it does not get better, I can't do this anymore. And the article continued where it said, Ter-Beek is one of the growing number of people across the West choosing to end their lives rather than live in pain. Pain that in many cases can be treated. Live in pain. Fascinating. I was reading another article from the 28th of May, 2024, last year, and this is what was written about her. She was 29, and doctors helped her to die. The article writer says that I told Zoraya Ter-Beek I understood her suffering, but hoped she would decide to live. Fascinating. As I was reading through this article, I had a similar case in my life where I was working with a person who was suffering with immense mental health struggles. But because of the advices we were given and the professional help that person was received, that person is now living a good life. And it was just incredible to see the different outcomes of two people. Now, I want to remind you that she did not suffer any terminal or incurable illness. It's clear that she was suffering from mental health challenges where she was thinking that it's no worth to live anymore. And so to the question, remember the topic that we studied yesterday? Is there life, how did it continue? Before death? Is there life before death? She would have answered what? No. There is no life before death, and therefore the solution to it is to commit suicide. And there is actually a movement in the West, and also here in the Nordic countries, it's called pro-death movement. It's not called pro-life movement. Some of you know what that is about. Pro-death movement. In other words, to give people who are teenagers and young people the legal right to end their lives just because they don't see any solution to the darkness that they might be in. And so the question is that really the solution? Is that really the way we are to go forward? Remember what we studied yesterday? That there are basically two stories that people can choose from. Either God is, and therefore life is meaningful, and therefore what can you do with the meaning of life? You are going to discover the meaning of life. But if God is dead, what's the consequence? Life is meaningless. And so the only good thing that you can do out of that is that you are going to do what with meaning? You are going to create your meaning, remember? And we went through the 6 points that the problems and the implications of creating your meaning is actually worse than the problem itself. And I was reading an article a couple of months ago. It's called the World Happiness Report. And in 2024, it was revealed a concerning trend. It said young people in the West are becoming, what's the word? Unhappier. The report went on to explain how young people who are under 30, how many of you are under 30? Let me see. Almost all of you. So people under 30 in Western societies are experiencing something that is what was previously considered a midlife crisis, what people had when they were in their 40s. And so the question is, why is this happening? That we see all of these trends, all of these movements, and young people especially are becoming unhappier with almost every single year. And there are a number of factors. We're not going to go through all the factors. I hate to break it to you, but the overuse of social media is definitely a part of it. I'm not going to take away your phone. I'm not saying that. But that's only the surface level, right? And the two deeper reasons why young people are feeling unhappier is what we went through yesterday. Let me see if it works, because it was working. Come on, don't do it to me. There you go. Remember, we went through this. God is dead. Life is meaningless, and therefore you have to create your own meaning. But remember the child that was going to the psychiatrist? Remember the movie? The mother was taking the child to the psychiatrist, and the mother was screaming, "He's not doing his homework!" Remember? And then he was saying, "What's the point? If life is meaningless, what's the point of coming even out of bed? What's the point?" And remember what the psychiatrist said? Ha 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 ha, and then was laughing. And he was saying that basically the universe is only going to be destroyed in a couple of billions of years, so just then go and enjoy your life. But what is there to enjoy, right? So there is this meaninglessness that gives rise to despair. But number two, I believe one of the key reasons why young people are feeling unhappier is because, and this is where we are coming here, is that we have equated the meaning of life with happiness. In other words, if I don't feel happy, then something must be wrong. We have equated the goodness of life, we have acquainted ourselves that if I want to have the good life, it must always be and to do with happiness. So it does not matter how I am happy, things have to be fun, and if it is not fun, I'm not going to do it. And so this is basically giving us an understanding of how things are. Now, there's nothing wrong with happiness itself. I'm not saying that. I'm not a party killer. So the problem is not happiness. The thing is, what we're going to discover is that if you want to be really happy, you're not going to search for happiness. Instead, happiness is going to come as a byproduct of doing something purposeful. It is going to be as a consequence of you living a certain life, and happiness is not going to come before that. It's going to come as a consequence out of it. You know, the ancient thinkers, if you could help me, thank. One more. Okay, Taylor Swift, you know her. Can we go back? Just one. Taylor Swift said, "My ultimate goal is to end up being what? Happy. Most of the time." So this is in our culture. It's in the movies, it's in the songs, it's in the stars. We are being told that if you want to live a good life, you better be happy. And so we are thinking to ourselves, well, I'm not happy all the time. And we acquaint that with, well, I'm not living a good life. If we go to the next, it says, in the biblical framework, as we discovered, the good life was lived in this context. So we believe that there is a source, that life has a beginning. What that means is that God had a purposeful beginning to this world, to life. And that meant what we discovered yesterday was the logos, that life has a meaning. Remember, Jesus himself has come into the world, and he's the meaning of life. But then we also have the telos, which is basically saying that life has not only a purposeful beginning, life doesn't have only meaning here, but we are going somewhere. There is a purpose to life. We are going towards a certain goal in life, and that's what I preached about this divine service, that we are longing for Eden, remember? We are going towards Eden, the restoration of paradise. That's the hope that we can have, and which we are to invite people to discover a what kind of story? You guys remember? A better story. That's what we want people to see. Now, if we're going to go to the next things, you see, to know that if life is worth living, we must understand what is worth having and desiring. This is a key text. This is a key thought. If life is worth living, and I believe it is, then what is it that is worth in life, which is worth to, invest your time in, invest your resources in, and so on? What is it that is worth having and to desire? That will be the life that is worth to live. If we can go to the next. This man is a fascinating man. If there is a book you should all read, it's a book by Viktor Frankl, and it's the book's name is The Meaning. It's talking about the meaning of life, that life has a purpose. You know who he is? He was an Austrian psychiatrist who was first working with Sigmund Freud. He was this other big psychiatrist, but then he left from his thoughts, and he was a Jew. And so when the Nazis basically took over much of Europe, they put him and his entire family into Auschwitz and into the concentration camps. And so as a psychiatrist, he had already developed a sort of philosophy of how do you live the good life. And he started to realize that the good life is when people are living purposeful lives. It is when they are not thinking about themselves primarily, but it is when they are thinking about others. So this is the other-centered, unselfish love. And he was actually, as a psychiatrist in the concentration camp, studying the prisoners who was there with him, who are the ones who are surviving and who are the ones that are not. And he basically came to the conclusion that those who did not find meaning, even in their most horrible experiences, they were the ones who died. And as long as you have meaning, he says, you are going to live. As long as you have hope, you're going to live. But once hope is gone, once meaning is gone, people just give up. And there was this, I don't want to speak too much about him because I have plenty of things to go through, but there is the story of a person who was spreading the news in the camp that, you know what, the Americans are going to come until Christmas. So this was like 1943, 1944, and he was saying, the Americans are going to come and they're going to liberate us. And he was so hopeful that the Americans are going to come, but Christmas came, and did the Americans come? No, they didn't. And you know what happened to him? He died. Like he died because he became so hopeless of the thing that he was holding on to, it disappeared. And so these are the things that he's writing about. You should really check him out. But basically he has this key insight. If we can go to the next slide. He says in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, you should really read that book. He says, for success like happiness, it cannot be pursued, it must ensue. So in other words, you are not to search for it, happiness is going to come to yourself. And it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. Happiness must happen, and the same holds for success. And I love this sentence. You have to let it happen by not caring about it. In other words, happiness comes when you don't think about happiness. Happiness comes when you're basically not preoccupied with yourself, but you are preoccupied with something that is greater than yourselves. And happiness will come as a byproduct and as a consequence of living and thinking like that. Now, he has this powerful quote where he is playing on Nietzsche's word, and this is what he says. He says, this is going to come on the quiz, so you better memorize this sentence, okay? I'm just telling you. He who has a why to live can bear with almost anyhow. And that was the question that I was asking you yesterday. What is your why? What is your why? What is it that makes you grow, not just to grow up, of course, but what is it that makes you to come out of bed every morning? What is it? Is it a duty only? Okay, sure. But do you have anything more in life than duties? Do you have something more than you live for than, let's say, the things that are just happening in your life? Do you have a why? He says if you have, then whatever happens in you, you're gonna be okay. Whatever comes in life, whether suffering, pain, or other things, if you have a why, it's going to be good. So let's go to the next slide, because now we're going to get into the topic of happiness. Sigmund Freud is this big psychiatrist, and he is most of the time, in my view, completely wrong. In Swedish we would say, han är helt ute och cyklar. So he is completely out and doing his own thing. But there are things that Sigmund Freud got really good. And this is one of those things. He says, once again, only what? Only religion can answer the question of the purpose of life. Why? Well, we just saw that if God is dead, what's the next? Life is meaningless. And if life is meaningless, the only thing you have is created meaning. He knows that the purpose of life can only happen in a religious framework. And he continues to say, one can hardly be wrong in concluding that the idea of life having a purpose stands and falls with the religious system. In other words, if you really want to experience meaning of life, you have to do it in the context that God exists, and in that context, life is going to get meaningful, and God will help you to discover your personal meaning. Next, please. What we are going to go through in the rest of the presentation, for me personally, it has been an eye-opener. Because if you are able to follow what I'm going to tell you now, it is going to help you to not go astray on paths in which you are only going to get disappointed. Basically, if you are able to follow this in your life, you are going to experience happiness. I can guarantee you that. Not because of me, but because of what we are studying. You see, the ancient people, and including the biblical authors, they believe that happiness consists of 4 levels. How many levels? 4 levels. And I'm going to read them to you, and then we're going to go through them step by step. So they believe that the pleasure was one of those things, and then there was the passion. So basically, we would say this: you have the pleasure-driven life, you have the passion-driven life, you have the purpose-driven life, and then what they would call the highest good. In other words, whatever comes on the top of your pyramid, whatever comes at the top of your life, that is going to be your meaning, okay? And if you put them in the right hierarchy and don't put the wrong things on the top, you are going to basically be able to go through life pretty good. So let's take point number 1, the pleasure-driven life. So, is it good with pleasures? What would you say? Of course, pleasures are a good thing. If you believe that God has created you, God has actually created us to enjoy life. If you think about it, in the biblical narrative, when God creates humanity, God puts humanity where? There's a certain place of that. Anybody remembers? God puts them in Eden. Very good. Do you know what Eden means? It means pleasure. What that tells us is God from the beginning is not against pleasure. God says, like, here, just eat of all of the trees except one. He says, just enjoy whatever I have given to you as good gifts. But the problem becomes when your life is going to be pleasure-driven only. You just live for the pleasures. You live for the food, you live for the sex, you live for whatever that comes. You live for the money, you live for all of that. When that comes at the top of your hierarchy, that's the problem that comes. But pleasure in its right context is a good thing. But in this, if people only choose the pleasure-driven life, it's basically an obligation to self alone kind of mentality. Number 2 is the passion-driven life. We say that in Swedish. If someone has like really good talents of doing things, let's say someone is talented in teaching, we would say that that person is passionate about what he or she is doing. Han har passion för det. So they are passionate about what they are doing. So here you go from the pleasure-driven life to the passion-driven life, and this is a life of accomplishments. This is a life of career. So basically, the reason why you exist is the success. It is your career, it's the work, it's the whatever it is that you believe is going to give you the happiness in life. So, is there anything wrong with passion? Of course not. Passion is a good thing, and I think we should be passionate about things that are important to us. But what happens to you when the things that you have hoped for are going to give you happiness doesn't give you happiness? You see where we are going? It leads only to emptiness. So this is a call of self-actualization. We are living to actualize ourselves. Life is about ourselves. I am to proceed, and so on and so on. Now we have point number 3, and that is the purpose-driven life. What happens is in the purpose-driven life, the focus is not on yourself anymore. The focus is on helping others. Is it a good thing to help others? Of course it is. So the focus shifts from self to living for others, and happiness here is tied in the long-term fulfillment. You probably have heard phrases like, it is good to do good. This is the kind of thinking, it's good to do good kind of summary that we have here. So to do good is to go beyond yourself, and gratification is not seen in the short-term perspective, but in the long-term perspective, when I don't put myself in the center, but I put others people ahead of me. Once again, nothing wrong with that, but that's the purpose-driven life. But then the ancient thinkers, they also believed that there was something even higher than just the purpose-driven life. And that was what you can see here as point number 4, the ultimate good. The ultimate good. I was really thinking, how could I give an illustration to you guys to try to, how can I say, explain what the highest good in life can be. So let me ask you a question. How many of you have seen the movie Lord of the Rings? Okay, some of you had. How many of you have heard of Lord of the Rings? Okay, you have. There is a character in the movie which is called Gollum. You know who Gollum is? Now Gollum is the one who has had the ring for one particular time of his life. What did the ring do to him? It destroyed him, right? Anybody remembers what he calls the ring? My precious, my precious, my precious. And when I was thinking through how can I best give the illustration of what the highest good in life can be, it is my precious. Whatever your precious is, that is going to be your highest good. And the thing is that every single person has some kind of precious that they build their lives around. Everybody has some kind of precious in which they are centering their lives. Everybody. So the key question to ask is your precious giving your life? Or is your precious destroying your life like it did to Gollum and later on with Frodo? Now, as I said, if you have seen the movie, the ring destroys anybody who, hold on to it. So there is a thing that can destroy you, but there is also a thing that can uplift you and give your life. And my question to you is, what is your highest good? What is it that you put on the top of your hierarchy in which you think, if I have that, then I have happiness? Let me give you another example. How many of you have seen the movie Lion King? The old one, yeah, not the new one. No. The old one is the real deal. Remember Simba. Simba is supposed to be the new king, right? But what is it that Simba does? He abandons his responsibilities. And he believes that he can live a careless life because that's the ultimate goal of his existence. So he comes out, right? And then there's the song. Remember the song? Hakuna Matata? Remember? You're singing, you're dancing to it. Hakuna Matata is the carefree life. It's the life of no responsibilities. It's the life of, just let go and just live your life. Interestingly, that you have the theme in these other movies, like you have the Jungle Book with Mowgli, and when he meets Baloo, there is the song, look for the bare necessities and forget about your worries, and you strive. So you have this Hakuna Matata mentality of Simba, in which he thinks that, the ultimate goal in life is just to do things. But then, what happens to Simba? He becomes a lion. He matures. And he realizes that his true purpose and happiness, it cannot be by abandoning responsibilities and going on with Timon and Pumbaa and living life with them, but instead he has to embrace the highest good. He has to embrace the thing which he has been created for, the thing in which he has been designed for. And so what the movie is trying to teach us is that life is not going to come, the happiness is not going to come from a pleasure-driven life, but it's going to come when you have discovered the highest good, the reason why you exist. And I could give you several examples of different movies which are trying to show us the different levels of happiness and how that can become ours. And this is how the ancient thinkers were thinking. They believed that the highest good, this is going to come on the quiz, so remember this, is the wisdom-driven life. What did I say? It's the wisdom-driven life. The ancient thinkers believed that there were certain moral values and ethical values in which we were supposed to discover, and by ourselves we would incorporate these ideas into our lives and we would follow them. This was the wisdom-driven life. But do you know? The Bible, in a sense, agrees with it, but the biblical story radically separates itself from the ancient view of the wisdom-driven life. What do I mean by that? The Bible doesn't say that you are to search for happiness. Happiness is going to come when you have found the highest good. And who is the highest good within the biblical story? It is Jesus himself. Remember, he is the meaning that has come, and he is also the highest good for which we have been created to get to know, and in an ever-deepening experience, see who he is. And once you have God in the biblical story, once you put God as he becomes my precious, God becomes the top of my hierarchy, you are going to experience happiness. And if you don't believe me, this is actually what the Bible teaches. I'm going to give you now a couple of Bible verses to back it up. This is not like, oh, this is Pastor Sebastian talking about it. No, this is what the Bible says. Psalms chapter 16 verse 11 says, this is King David who is speaking, okay? He says, you will make known to me the path of life. In your presence is what? Fullness of joy. In your right hand there are what? Pleasures forevermore. I love this Bible text because this text encaptures the different levels of happiness which we have been talking about, and how the ancient people were thinking of how happiness can come. Notice that first he talks about, you will make known to me the what? The path of life. In other words, this is the purpose-driven life. This is living for something more than to myself. Is he also talking about pleasures? It's there in the last part of verse 11. He says, I will have pleasures forevermore. So the Bible is not against pleasures. The Bible is confirming pleasures, but within the right context. But what's in the middle of the text? It says, in your what? Presence is what? Fullness of joy. Not partial joy, not 95% joy, fullness of joy, which you can develop into and grow into more and more. David says, if I just come into your presence, it literally says, by the way, when I come into your face, in your presence, then I will see you. Did you know what it's talking about? Relationship. If I just can experience a relationship with you, I will have the fullness of joy. And it makes sense because we are all relational beings. We are all created to get to know God. That's the very reason for why you and I exist. And the psalmist says, in your presence is the fullness of joy. You have been created for something bigger than yourself. You have actually been created to get to know the very Creator who has a plan for your life. It's powerful. Let's go to the next text. This is still in the Psalms. Psalms chapter 73. It says, whom have I in heaven but you? I desire you more than anything on earth. Another translation says in Contemporary English Version, in heaven I have only you, and on this earth you are all I want. Has the highest good for David become God? Yes or no? Absolutely. And he says, God, you are my precious. In you, I have the fullness of joy. And he recognizes that if I have God on the top of my hierarchy, I will have purpose in life, I will have passion in life, and I will have also, what's the last one? Pleasures in life. You know, once you put God on the top, you will have everything else. But the problem comes when we put these created things and we put that on the top of our hierarchy, so that becomes our happiness, our meaning, our precious, and so on and so on. Let's go quickly to the New Testament. This is the Apostle Paul speaking. Ephesians chapter 3 verse 19, it's like goes right to what it means. He says, to know what? To know the, this is coming on the quiz, to know the love of Christ, which passes what? Knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. What would Paul say? What is the highest good according to Apostle Paul's thinking? It is to experience the what? The love of Christ. It is to recognize that the climax of the gospel story, which I preached about, Jesus himself is to experience that love from him. And if you have that, you have everything. We could even say, if we go to the next slide, you see, happiness in the Bible is not pursued, it is bestowed. Happiness in the Bible is not earned through your efforts, it is actually a gift flowing from divine love to you already. Happiness is not constructed through your goals, that I'm going to put my goals in life, and when I have the goals, then I'm going to have happiness. No. The happiness in the Bible is discovered through connection with the Creator. And finally, it is not something where you strive to build a meaningful life necessarily, but it is granted by God where He becomes your highest good. And if this becomes your experience, you will be liberated from the burdens of what society is telling you. Because society is telling you happiness is to be pursued. Happiness has to be earned. Happiness is to be constructed. And happiness is to be strived for. And the biblical answer is no. It's a counter message to what our society is teaching. It says that if you have God, God is going to give you the happiness in which you can go with Him. But this is our problem. Our problem is, guys, if God is dead, what happens to source? Is there a purposeful beginning to life if God is dead? Why would it be? If God is dead, is there a logos to life? Is there a meaning with capital M? There is none. And if God is dead, is there any telos to life? Is there any goal? Is there any purpose? Is life going somewhere? It doesn't. So as I showed you in yesterday's clip, remember the kid? He's not doing his homework. What's the point? But in the Christian story, there is a point with life, and that's what I want to share with you in the rest of the minutes that we have together. So what's worth having? Let's go through each of the points, and I'm going to show you that if you are making the first three things your highest good, you are actually not going to find the true fullness of joy which the Bible is talking about. So, I mean, who doesn't want to be famous, right? Who doesn't want to have the big bucks, the big money, the big houses? Who doesn't want to have everybody's following you, everybody's doing this, everybody's doing that? Who doesn't want to do that? But have you noticed that the superstars in the world are the most miserable people? And I'm not speaking badly of them or judging them. It's just a fact. For instance, you know Beatles, right? The Beatles, the song group. Oh, they are that old. Okay. Now, the Beatles, Paul McCartney, Beatles, this enormous group in the 60s and the 70s, says, we have been the Beatles, which was marvelous, but I think generally there was this feeling of, yeah, well, it's great to be famous, it's great to be rich, but what's it all for? Imagine that this Beatles, they were dreaming about becoming rock stars. They were dreaming about becoming music stars. And once they were there, they were like, what's the point of doing all of this? That's the thing. What people are sensing and experiencing is that something is missing in their lives. Have you sensed that in your life too? Like something is missing, and you feel that you are on the journey of finding whatever that is, but you feel that something is missing. This is what Paul McCartney is speaking about. I thought that the happiness with capital H, I'm going to get that when we as the Beatles, we're going to get famous, we're going to get cars, we're going to get money, we're going to get all of that, girls, this and that, party. But then he says, this is emptiness. The physical things cannot give us the fulfillment for the emptiness that we have in our lives. If you make pleasure the highest good in your life, you will be disappointed. Once again, nothing wrong with pleasures. But if you make pleasure the highest good, you are going to get disappointed. Let me quote to you from Jim Carrey. Anybody knows Jim Carrey? No, he's not that old. Jim Carrey said, I hope everybody could get rich and famous and will have everything they ever dreamed of, so they will know that it's not the answer. Wow. He says, I wish. Why? Because he says, I've been there. He says, I have had the $1 million. I have had the house. I have had the famousness. He says, I have had all of that. It doesn't give you happiness. That's what we think gives happiness. And he says, I just wish anybody would be in my shoes for 6 months and they recognize, this is not the answer to my life. You see, our problem is that we think that the pursuit of happiness is the pursuit of pleasure, and it's not. Pleasures are not satisfying you. You know why? Because pleasures are something that you have to keep intensify. You have to have them more and increase them so that you feel happy, or over time, just to feel normal. And after a while, the freedom that you thought you had, it has completely enslaved you. And so my question to you is, guys, what if our desires and longings for pleasure, which we believe material objects will satisfy, what if they actually mislead us? But more than that, what if our desires and longings actually have a name? What if the very thing that you are searching within themselves is actually a call from God Himself? I'm trying to illustrate this with the following point. Now, there is a story told of a faithful preacher who finds himself in a conversation with a woman who mocks the Christian faith. She claims that the Christian faith is outdated. And how can this preacher speak of a fulfillment without indulging in worldly pleasures like sexual, romantic relationships? And she says, religion is only a substitute for real passion. And then the preacher responds and he says, I would actually say the otherwise, just the other way around. Because when people are chasing after temporary pleasure, whether that's wealth, power, or romance, they are often looking for something deeper than mere pleasures. And then he says this is the mic drop, so if we can get the picture up. And then he says to the woman, the man who rings the bell at the brothel is unconsciously searching for God. You know what a brothel is? I hope not. A brothel is a place where people go to buy sex. And he's basically saying that the people who are searching the good life and the happiness in those pleasures, whether that's wealth, power, sex, or romance, he's basically saying that you are actually not searching for what you think. You are actually searching for God, but you are searching for God in the wrong place. The truth is that you have been created for communion with God. You have been created to get to know God, but the problem comes when we put these pleasures and these other things on the top of the hierarchy, and we think that that is going to give us happiness. Let's go to the next slide. What about the passion-driven life? Okay, you say the pleasure-driven life. There is a big problem if you base your life upon your success and your achievements. Why? Let me give you 2 examples. If we can go to the next slide. There are 2 problems with achievement-based happiness. Why? Point number 1, my question to you is, what happens when you fail? Notice I said when and not if. Because the time will come when you are going to fail in life. And I'm not the one that is trying to kill your party tonight. But the thing is that if you think that happiness is based on success, you are actually preparing yourself for a disaster later on in life, because when you fail, it's going to hurt hard. The thing is that in that disappointment, what are you going to do? Will your entire life collapse? Because if you have based it around achievement, now you have sensed failure, what are you going to do there? The problem is that if you connect your self-worth to your achievement or your lack thereof, you are creating something that the Bible calls building your house, not on the rock, but building your house on sand. You know what the Christian story says? The Christian story says, irregardless of your achievements or your failures, I love you. That's what God says. Irregardless wherever you are in life, your self-worth will never be diminished. That's the Christian story. But the secular story tells you, you have to earn your self-worth. You have to earn with your achievements. And that is going to lead you to point number 2. It is going to lead you to the trap of career slavery. Because in your striving for freedom, money is going to enslave you. Because you think that, I'm going to get free, and I'm going to do this. But eventually the reason what motivates you is the money. It's the hustling. That is what is going to lead you. And it is enslaving you without you even knowing about it. That's the problem with these things. If you can go to the next slide. G.K. Chesterton, he said, and this is a brilliant quote, he says, the loneliest moment in life is when you have just experienced that which you thought would deliver the ultimate, and it has let you down. What is he saying? He's saying that you think that the meaning of my life is that I'm going to become a doctor, a nurse, an engineer, or whatever. And when you meet those failures, when you come and it doesn't succeed, he says, if you have put that on the top of your hierarchy and you recognize that it didn't work out as you thought, he says you are going to get so disappointed. You're going to get so disappointed. And I could give you example after example of superstars who were on the verge of suicide because what they thought would deliver the ultimate had let them down. I used the example of Boris Becker. He was an old tennis player who was winning the Wimbledon. You know, the Wimbledon is the biggest thing that you can win in the tennis world. And he won the Wimbledon like several times. And the second time or the third time he won it, he was telling the interviewer a couple of months later, said, I was there in my hotel room and contemplating why I haven't taken suicide. The same day, he won the biggest thing that you can dream of. And he says, I still don't know why I haven't committed suicide. Why? Because if you allow empty things to get on the top of your hierarchy, you are going to reap the consequences, unfortunately. Let's go to the next slide. Friends, anybody? The guy in the middle, Matthew Perry, was the lead actor from Friends. He's a prime example. If you have read his biography, unfortunately he died a couple of years ago. If you have read his biography, you will discover that he was searching for fame, he was searching for wealth, he was succeeding in everything in Hollywood and show business, but still he was struggling with emptiness. He was still struggling with addiction. And that's the thing. You have to do something with the emptiness that you have yourself. And what led him to fill that emptiness? It was alcohol. And alcohol enslaved him So much so that if you watch some of the interviews with him in the last couple of years, you can see that he's been destroyed. Now, praise God, God delivered him out of that, because Matthew Perry writes in his book that he cried out to God, God, save me from this. And God did. But he was so destroyed that he realized success did not bring that fulfillment. Have you watched the news lately? Have you heard about the devastating fires in Los Angeles? And of course, there are other catastrophes around the world that we don't know about. And so I want to be very sensitive to when I say this, because it is a tragedy of what is happening. But imagine, put yourself in the situation where you have lived a life where you thought that the ultimate is going to be money, is going to be fame, and when I have enough money, the good life is going to be a big house with a big pool and beautiful cars. But what do you do when that disappears? What do you do when the things that you have built your entire life for in a moment disappears? What are you going to do? This only shows the emptiness of life, which is anchored in material possessions or empty pleasures of comfort. When homes are reduced to ashes and possessions vanish in an instant, you know what you are confronted with? You are confronted with the fragility of what we value the most. What do you value the most? What is it that is worth living for? Because whenever you experience tragedies, whether it is the loss of a home or a loss of a loved one, you recognize that life must be more than mere material possessions or career building. As I have said to you guys, in my humble opinion, it is only in seeking God to become the highest good, God becoming who you created, God created you to become, experiencing that ultimate connection with God. That is the only true foundation which we can build our lives upon. I love C.S. Lewis, brilliant author. He said this. He said, creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists. I know, guys, we have had a quite long day, but I ask you to please focus in these next couple of last 5 to 10 minutes. Because he has an argument. If you understand his argument, it can change your life. So let's read again. He says, creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists. So he goes through the argument. A baby feels hunger, well, there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim, well, there is such a thing as water. And here comes his mic drop. He says, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. What is that? Eternity. You were made for eternity. You were made to get to know God. You were made for these deeper things in life, not only the shallow and empty things. In a personal letter, he writes in a little bit another way, but he gets even more succinct. He says, if you're really the product of a materialistic universe, what does it mean, materialistic universe? If there is no God, okay? If life is meaningless, that's what he says. If you're really the product of a materialistic universe, how is it that you don't feel at home here? Do you complain? Do the fish complain of the sea being wet? Of course the fish don't complain. But it is because they are in the place where they are supposed to be. But if you have seen my sermon today, you know that we are not in Eden, we are in exile. But the good news of the gospel is that the exile is not going to be permanent. We are going towards Eden, but these longings and desires that we have, they are showing us that you have been made for another world. Next slide. We have gone through the pleasure-driven life. We have gone through the passion-driven life. And I think we have seen that you cannot build your life upon them as the ultimate foundation. I'm not saying that you cannot have them in life. I'm not saying that. But you can't have them as the ultimate foundation. It's like building your house upon a sand. But you say, Sebastian, what about purpose? Isn't it good to build your life upon purpose? And it is. It is so much better to build your life on purpose than it is upon pleasure and passion. People that are like fighting for a cause, political activists, politicians, doctors, pastors, other people, they are living with a purpose-driven life. And I've been actually thinking about it because I have come to realize for a couple of years ago that I had myself personally thought that it is the purpose-driven life that was going to give me ultimate happiness. As a pastor, as a worker for God. I mean, come on, as a worker for God. But what happens when you fail? What happens when you don't see the success you had envisioned? What are you going to do? What are you going to do in the disappointment of your purpose-driven life? Let me give you a story about Mark. He's a political activist. He is driven by a deep sense of purpose. He's working for social justice, equality. He's fighting for people that are living in poverty. He's working with human rights violations around the world, and his life is about purpose. He wants not only to make life better, he lives that kind of lifestyle. He's spending countless hours on organizing protests, lobbying governments, raising awareness for causes to make life better for people. But time is passing. Mark is beginning to face the harsh realities of his work. Despite all the energy he has put into the campaigns and the activism, people don't change. Governments don't listen. The systems of power, they are as entrenched as ever before. The same cycles of promises made are not promises kept, but promises broken over and over again. The tipping point for Mark came when he was working with global poverty. After years of working tirelessly, they managed to accomplish some solutions, but it wasn't big. Many of the people in power, they took the money that was supposed to go to the poor. Mark's most significant efforts felt empty, like nothing. He felt that his life was like a drop in an ocean. He was not accomplishing the change he was seeking. So in this time, Mark began to feel increasingly isolated and disconnected from his purpose. His personal relationships deteriorated because all his life was not about the relationship, it was about the cause. It was about helping people. He had little time with them. And eventually he was sensing that he was losing faith in the very thing that was giving him meaning and purpose. And he felt broken as ever before. In that moment of despair, Mark found himself sitting alone in his office, and he just asked himself, was it all worth it? All these years? All these sacrifices? Does it mean anything? Has it accomplished something? Maybe the world will never change, no matter how hard I try. Maybe all this effort, all this pain was just for nothing. Do you feel this? There are millions of Marks in our society. They live a purpose-driven life, but they are doing it without a transcendent framework. And because of failure, they got disappointed. And you know where it leads? Darkness and despair. You know what the good news is, though? If you have experienced failure, if you have experienced disappointment, there is still a good news in this. In the biblical story, did you know that there is no struggle and no sacrifice that we make that was for nothing? I want to say that again. In the biblical story, Because God exists and because life is meaningful, there is no struggle and no sacrifice that you make in this life that was for nothing. Even when it is unnoticed, it is recorded in the books of heaven. In the biblical story, you know what we can say? We can say, like it says in the movie Gladiator, if we go to the next slide, what we do in life echoes in eternity. That's the biblical story of a purpose-driven life. Although you may be disappointed and fail, or apparently fail, whatever you do, whatever good you have done, it echoes in all eternity. It doesn't have to be a big thing, you know. It is just a small thing of helping someone. What we do in life echoes in eternity. Why is that so? Yes, because in the climax story of Jesus Christ on the cross is what gives meaning to every good deed. Think about it. On the cross of Jesus, there Jesus is hanging. And he could have seen his sacrifice as a failure. I mean, think about it. His disciples, what did they do? They abandoned him. His own people had rejected him. They even crucified him. Yet Jesus is there bearing the sins of humanity on the cross. But he does the plan of God, knowing that even if the plan looks like a defeat, somehow it is going to go to ultimate victory. And so also in our moments of despair, when we feel our efforts in vain, we can look to Jesus. Whenever you feel the most discouraged, you can look to Jesus. Because Jesus knows exactly what it means to be disappointed, to be empty, and to know that it is apparent failure. But was it an apparent failure of Jesus on the cross? No. Because he not only died, 3 days later he was also resurrected. And it is because of the resurrection story of Jesus Christ that your life can also get a resurrection in itself. You can live for a greater purpose in your life because Jesus has come out of the tomb and he is alive and he will come back. We're about to end our presentation. Let's take a look at a couple of the ones that are left. Jesus says, seek ye what? Seek ye first. Do you see the priority? Do you see the highest good? Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. You know what Jesus says? If you put me on the top of your hierarchy, I'm going to give you what? Purpose. I'm going to give you passion. And I'm going to give you, what's the last one? Pleasure. Pleasure forevermore. We have come to the ending. We are about to land the airplane. Remember we started with her. Remember her? I began this talk about Zoroya Terbik. She was 29 and the doctors helped her to die. But I'm going to end this talk on a positive note because I'm going to tell another person. And I want you all to listen, okay? He was born without arms and legs. Shortly after his birth, his mother initially refused to even look at him or hold him. As he grew older, he was bullied in school because he had no arms and he had no legs. At one point, he even attempted to take his own life, but he survived after being rescued. Something profound happened in his life that completely transformed him and the way he looked at life and everything. There he is. Nik Vujicic, have you seen him? There are many powerful video clips about him, but he is the man, life without limits. And the guy enjoys life. Is he supposed to enjoy life? Actually not. If you think like logically, he has no arms, he has no legs. What is it that makes him to enjoy life? You know, next pick. Not only does he enjoy life, he has a beautiful wife, beautiful children even. My friends, we see two individuals, and I'm not judging them, but we see two individuals. We have Nick Vujicic on the one hand, and we have Zoroya Terbik on the other. They both have pain and suffering together, but they have chosen two completely different approaches to life. Nick has chosen to overcome pain. Zoraya has escaped her pain by choosing assisted suicide. How has it come to this? I believe the answer is because Nick himself has found Jesus. And when he understood that Jesus is his Savior, Jesus is the highest good of my life, Jesus is the meaning of my life, he says, I have no arms, no legs, no problem. I'm going to enjoy life. Because remember what the psalmist says, in your presence I have fullness of joy. You see, happiness doesn't come by circumstances. Happiness comes by a relationship with God, with an attitude of seeing God for who He is. If you go to the next, it says a video clip, so we can press on it.
So what is it? For me, it was arms and legs. For me, when we, as human beings, think about when you're hope-filled, you don't have to be hopeful. Listen, we all have a disability, and you know in your own heart, you can't heal your own heart. You can't drown out those voices in your head. That guilt, that shame, that loneliness, that brokenness will be there until you are rescued and healed. And my disability really was my broken heart. And it was at age 15 that I gave my life to Jesus Christ. Why? Because He finally answered my why.
What did He say at the end? Jesus Christ has answered my why. The highest good. Jesus had become His precious. Jesus had become the fullness of joy for him. So my question to you is, for Nick, Jesus became his why. Jesus became his top of the hierarchy. And because of that, does he have purpose? Of course. Is he passionate about life? Of course. Is he enjoying life? Of course. Why? Because that's true Christianity. My question to you is, has Jesus become your why? And if not, why? May God richly bless you as you are thinking about it. But I want to implore you, put Jesus first. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. Thank you.